All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It is Tuesday, December 14th, 2021, and we are gathered for the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission meeting, at which we will hold a brief special called session to consider two items, followed by an agenda-setting session. And I would like to ask Clerk Spratlin if she could call the roll for us.
Davenport.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Link.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Denson.
Here.
Poole.
Here.
Edwards.
Present.
Myers.
Here.
Thornton.
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. Before we proceed with business, I have a presentation I'd like to provide. So I'm going to come down in front. Thank you, Madam Clerk. It's been a long time since we've had this opportunity. I'd like to call forward our staff support from Solid Waste, as well as members of the Solid Waste Citizen Advisory Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm going to have Commissioner Davenport come down and join me as well. I'm going to hand these to you so you can distribute them to members. One of the things that we love about this community is the sense of volunteerism and the willingness of so many members of the community to be a sounding board for our activities and to provide us with some guidance. We couldn't do this work without all of you. And we're very excited because one of our longest standing advisory committees, the Solid Waste Citizens Advisory Committee, is now here at its 30th anniversary. So have a brief proclamation I'd like to read on this occasion. So, whereas in 1991, the unified government of Athens-Clarke County created the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and whereas the Solid Waste Advisory Committee was tasked with evaluating the community's solid waste management needs, which parenthetically I'll say we receive emails about all the time, including this week. And whereas the Solid Waste Advisory Committee helped establish the Athens-Clarke County Recycling Program, recommended the hiring of a local recycling coordinator to develop and manage Athens-Clarke County's recycling collection, waste reduction and education program, procured a public-private recovered material processing facility, introduced pay-as-you-throw garbage fee systems for both commercial and residential customers, participated in the development of Athens-Clarke County's Subtitle D Municipal Solid Waste Landfill, and volunteered countless hours of time at special events to promote recycling and waste reduction. And whereas the Solid Waste Advisory Committee is the only advisory board that's remained active since Athens-Clarke County's unification in 1991, now therefore I, Kelly Gertz, Mayor of the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County, do hereby congratulate the Solid Waste Advisory Committee on their 30th anniversary. So thank you all so much for your work. Mr. Davenport is going to distribute these to you. We can't thank you enough. And thank you, Joe and Suki, for your efforts on staff every day. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Mayor, I think one of the members, Jared Harper, probably picks up more tonnage and garbage than you do on the streets.
I
all
think
over.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, can I get a photo real quickly with Commissioner Davenport? Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
All right, so given our special called meeting, we have two items, one item of old business and one item of new business to consider in a few minutes under suspension of rules. Old business is adoption of certified maps with amended condition district boundaries. Of course, we've had email communication from staff indicating that there have been some modifications that the state has presented regarding the boundaries. Manager Williams, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you for some technical input.
Thank you. Mayor, and if I might, while our Chief Data Officer, Joseph D'Angelo, is getting set up, I might just revisit kind of how we got here for anybody that's watching that may not be familiar with it. But once every 10 years, it's always after the census is taken and we understand the population, it's important to rebalance the various voting districts that are associated with both local, federal, and state elected offices. And in this case, after we got the census results late this year, it was on the local government to come up with a proposed map to present to the state legislature for their approval in this upcoming session that begins in January. And this commission voted to ask the Board of Elections to work with staff to come back with a recommended map. And that recommended map was recommended by the Board of Elections to the Mayor and Commission. The Mayor and Commission looked at it and then submitted it to the State Office of Reapportionment, who are tasked with checking any map that's presented for the legislature for approval from localities. And they responded back with some changes that they would like to see. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight briefly is some of those changes, answer your questions about that. The process from here forward is the commission would vote to submit it to the legislature. Now, I will tell you that our local delegation, which is made up of our state representatives and state senators, they prefer, require, however they want, would like a unanimous vote on it. And before they present it to the commission and to the legislature. So it could go any number of ways if it's not a unanimous vote. The state could redraw it themselves, which I think was done 10 years ago. But there are guidelines that affect this, and this is what staff has observed, along with the Board of Elections, along with the State Board of Reapportionment. There are best practices and requirements statutorily when you redraw these maps. So all of this is done so that I just want the public to know that this is done in a public way and that there are laws that have to be observed, and we're trying to go through a process of different levels of government in order to get something that meets the Voting Rights Act requirements and state law as well. So with that, if I didn't butcher that too bad, Chief Data Officer,
No,
Angelo,
sir.
I'll turn it over to you.
I think that was perfect. Enough said. But I'm here to answer any additional questions about the more recent edits proposed by the State Reapportionment Office and made by staff, or any other questions y'all might have.
Thanks, Joseph. Are there any questions for staff, just given that we've received some updates from the state? Would anyone like to dive into any of those? Yeah,
Well, I
Commissioner Parker.
just wanted to thank staff for all the work they've put in, especially on these short timelines. I know that it's been a lot, and from my view, it's been very complex work as well, so I just want to express my gratitude. Are we also, is the floor now given for any other comments, or are we still on questions?
If you have some questions for staff.
Okay, sounds good.
Given we've gotten some new information, we'll do that, and then I'll ask somebody to put a motion on the floor, so. Questions for staff, Commissioner Davenport?
So there's some slight modification from what we voted on. Can you, my eyes are bad. I cannot tell the difference. It was like,
Same thing on the map? Yeah.
okay, what, was it just a neighborhood? Can you explain that to the public and for me as well, where the 1% change took place?
Yes, sir. So to clarify for the benefit of the public, the guidance from the Reapportionment Office, they encouraged us strongly to get down from the 9.44% deviation that we initially presented to you all, so a spread from district to district of about 1,200 folks. They encouraged us to get down to more like 1 to 1.5%, which 1% you're looking at 129 individuals. So we did do that. We got that spread down from 1,200 down to about 369 in total from district to district. And we were able to do that by moving an additional 12 census blocks around the county. So every county, or every district in the county did see a change either between the first round, which you all voted on, voted to forward to the Reapportionment Office for technical review, and the second round. So between one and the other, everything was touched at least a little bit. In your particular district, Commissioner Davenport, the director of the Reapportionment Office had some very specific guidance in the vicinity of Hollis Street. That totaled three census blocks, totaling about 74 folks in that particular move. And then there was an additional block that had kind of a ragged boundary, which was Shoal Creek. And she encouraged us to look at moving that boundary consistent with what Athens Road turns into Winterville Road, just to have a more well-defined and concrete boundary for the district line. And that resulted in moving about 14 individuals in that particular case. Some other changes, we did have to do some balancing with a few other districts that were not within that 1% to 2% of the mean being 12,000. 867, thank you. I should know that right off the top of my head, but for whatever reason I don't. So District 10 saw an additional 3 blocks moved, 2 of which went into District 3, I believe, and then an additional 1 into another district. But the bottom line is we had to preserve contiguity, meaning that everything had to be continuous. So if a district came out on the high side, we had to find somewhere to move those lines to balance things out. I said in my correspondence to y'all, this is the most balanced map we've ever had. We have a standard deviation on this map of 125 individuals. It's a very small number. This really is a great representation of the one person, one vote principle.
Any other technical questions for staff? Jesse?
I think I read in an email from Manager Williams that this is the closest to equal number of people we've ever had. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so go ahead, sir. So the 2012 map got down to about a spread of about 3.12%. This one's and that was a pretty balanced map. That's pretty good when, again, you're dealing with, about 120 folks in any direction. This one's about 2.86%. In either direction, so about 1.5% on the high side and about 1% on the low side. It's pretty balanced.
Melissa?
Well, if I could though,
Go
just
ahead.
with Commissioner Hull, but balancing that could take any number of shapes, and I think that's been sort of the issue that I know heard from the Board of Elections that, I think anybody would prefer to have very symmetrical shapes to encapsulate those people, but I would say that's made more difficult. So I say that to say, is there other ways to draw the map? Absolutely, and you could draw it other ways, but why it looks like it does is because we started with the premise that we shouldn't deviate from the previous, and there was history that people didn't like the previous, so that's where I think we got into a little bit of a churn. And I would just say, if we had a perfectly square county with the population absolutely evenly distributed, then we could have symmetrical shapes. But it's made more difficult by the geographic features that we have, where people live. We have density in some places and not in others. And so you end up with some abnormal shapes. And this is one version of it that our staff has tried to get down to a statistical nominal amount.
And I'll add that you added the population equivalent of an additional district, right? You added about 12,000 folks between 20. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just trying to understand the changes to my district, to District 3. And as best I can tell, it looks like there's some riverfront territory, like in the Sycamore Drive Beachwood area, Beach Haven area. Is that correct? Or are there other areas where the boundaries changed a little bit?
Yes, ma'am.
Normal town, okay.
Yeah, so in the first round, your district experienced no adjustment because it was pretty close to the mean. The second time around, we had to do 2 things. We had to add a few folks to your district, somewhere between 1 and 200 in terms of population. And then also, we had to boost District 9 a little bit because District 9 was a little bit lacking. And then at the same time, we had to remove some population from District 10, which was over according to that 1% to 2% principle. And so we had to do a double move with yours. We had to add a little bit to District 9 or from yours, and then also add a little bit from District 10 in the Sycamore Drive area. To the tune of about 425 individuals from District 10. And yes, there are some zero blocks in that area that are irregular because they are bordering either unnamed tributaries or the river itself.
So where, in what vicinity has has District 9 gained District 3 territory? I'm trying to.
So there were, and I'm just going to rely on my notes. That was 2 census blocks near the intersection of North Avenue and Willow Street.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yes, they do border the river as well.
Okay.
Other technical questions, Carol?
This is kind of this is a question about the state's request that we go from the 10% variance to the 1 to 1.5% variance. Do we have any information about whether or not that was a request made to other counties? Or did we get this special homework assignment?
Yes, ma'am. I'll say that was a surprise to us, a surprise that cropped up back on December the 8th, so less than a week ago, when we received our first feedback from the technical review from the reapportionment office. The answer to your question is yes. I've been informed by Director Wright that most counties are running in the 1 to 3% range. The feeling is that there is the technical prowess exists to get down into that range, and so to have a safe harbor from a legal standpoint, we should be striving for something around there. Honestly, a lot of the, and again, I'm not an attorney, and Attorney Drake is, and possibly could provide you some more guidance, but that safe harbor principle of 10% seems to have been weakened with a case against the Georgia Secretary of State that occurred back in 2004. And so, again, for the maximally defensible map, the reapportionment office requested that for us to get into that range. But yeah, it was everything we saw prior to that said 10% is a safe harbor. If you get to 10%, you're good, and then after that, the guidance kind of changed.
All right. Any other technical questions before I ask somebody to put a motion on the floor? Commissioner Wu.
This is more just a timing question. And I really appreciate how much staff has scrambled to make this happen on the condensed timeline because of how late we got the census data and everything. But if we were to walk away from tonight trying to start back over from the beginning with a whole new approach to the maps, how much time would it take, by your estimate, for staff to do what they needed to do, bring it back to us for approval, then get it to the reapportionment office, get it back here, and then get it out?
Yeah, that's a good question, Commissioner Hool. Well, I'll just remind y'all that we ended up about a week behind from our projected timeline. And that time is directly attributable to the backlog that occurred in the reapportionment office. So that's something that's beyond our control. So I think we could, if you all decided to go back to the drawing board, we could certainly have some new map for you the second week of January. The legislative session, you're going to want to have at least a week before the legislative session. You need a week before the legislative session ends to send an adopted map to the legislature because you have to make a public announcement a week prior to sending it, from what I understand. So sometime between the second week of January and the end of January, we would have to produce a map. It would have to get certified. You'd be starting from scratch with the reapportionment office. It would have to come back here. Y'all would have to adopt that certified map and then have a week to announce it and then forward it to the legislature. So it would be tight.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion to suspend the rules if that's what we need to get us started.
We don't need that until the next
Okay.
item.
Oh, okay.
What's your motion going to be?
He was looking for a motion to suspend the rules for new business, but this is old business.
Oh, okay.
So we don't need a motion to suspend the rules. Commissioner Thornton, did you have a technical question?
It wasn't technical,
Okay.
but I have a
All right.
question. So do you want me to make a motion so I could be the first one to speak?
If you'd like to make a motion, please go right ahead.
I make a motion to adopt the certified amended commission district maps.
Seconded?
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Thornton, second from Commissioner Parker. Go right ahead, Commissioner Thornton.
My question is not technical at all. I looked at the map earlier today. Yesterday was just bad, but I totally didn't get it. I mean, I understand, but that's probably my fault, but I didn't have enough time. I will be voting against it because one of the concerns that I got from folk from District 2 and 9 was they just felt that they did not have enough public input. So I will be voting against it, but I did want to explain why, and I did want to say how much I appreciate the work. But I think we do have a community now that is wanting to be more involved and looking to be educated, and that's my only reason.
All right, would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Commissioner Houle?
Yeah, I guess I'm confused. Was your motion to approve the map, but you're planning to vote no on your own motion?
Yes, I am, because I wanted to speak to it.
Can you do that?
Yeah, sure.
You certainly can.
Okay. Well, I guess I would encourage my colleagues to consider that the position we're in, the corner we're painted into by the constraints of space-time, is that if we don't approve a map tonight, I think for all intents and purposes, we don't really have an opportunity to approve any kind of map in time for the legislature to consider it, in time for it to be adopted by them before our local election begins, which this is all relevant to. And I think we've heard fairly clearly from the state legislature that they'd like this body to present something with unanimity. So I guess I would encourage any colleagues who are thinking about voting no on this motion to weigh heavily that even a single no vote is the equivalent of a majority of us practically voting no and keeping us from being able to submit any kind of map that we've had any kind of input on to the state legislature for them to consider. So I would like to support the motion to approve, and I would like to ask the motioner to reconsider their assertion about how they're thinking of voting. Thank you.
Commissioner Parker?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd also like to speak in favor of the motion on the floor. I don't think any of us are happy with the process of input, but I do think it's very dangerous to not submit anything at all. We do all have very intimate understandings of the neighborhoods in which we live, representing fewer people than our state representatives do. And so to forward a vision for the way our district should break down, that we can best understand, because we know the streets intimately, we know the neighborhoods intimately, makes a lot of sense to me. With regards to District 2, the map that we have before us, as the manager said, is the closest to one person, one vote that we've ever had. The current map moves 74 people from District 2 into District 1. Another area, moving the boundary from an unnamed stream to Winterville Road, which is a very obvious geographic landmark, moves 14 individuals. There are very, very minor boundary changes that brings it really close to people having truly proportional representation for the first time ever. I think that's really important, that ends up reflected in, as best it can, in the final map that comes out of the state legislature, which we can only try our best to accomplish by honoring the really hard work that staff has done, that our own appointed Board of Elections member has done, including a member that is from District 2, and approving this map tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion before we call for a vote? Commissioner Myers?
I would like to speak to the motion. I'm going to be supporting it, and I would also love if we had a majority of us voting, or not a majority, all of us voting for this. I am concerned not on a personal level, but on a meta level about how this opens the possibility up. It just makes it easier politically for our state representatives and our state assembly to throw back something to us that would really sort of confuse our whole political process here. And I also actually would like to ask, and I don't mean this in a confrontational way at all, but in a very just help me understand way, because I'm actually a very mathematical person, and this process seems very math-oriented. You got to move things here and there. And I might not have known that before, so I had to be educated about it. And I am just like, what kind of public input? I mean, it seems like we have to educate the public, but how could the public inform this process based on the numbers? And I'm not saying that cynically or sarcastically, but in just a desire to understand that. So if anyone wants to speak to that, or they could speak to me later personally.
So Commissioner Myers, as chair, would you like me to ask the floor if there's some specific input on that?
Yes, that would be great, Mayor.
Is there some?
Oh, that's right, the mayor's, right.
Alternate approach, Commissioner Thornton, Commissioner Denson?
I'm not a math person, but I do know that, Joe, I believe you had a Zoom meeting with some constituents, community folk, about and it was on the previous map. It was not on this map. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am, that is right.
And so my point is, and that's what I was just whispering, because I thought I saw this Friday, but apparently I saw it came yesterday.
Yes, ma'am.
So the folk that had the concerns, whenever you talk to them on the Zoom meeting, this isn't even the map that you talked about, and that was their concern, that they really wanted to be more involved, whether it's to discuss the changes, but they just want to be more involved in the process. And this is where I've stood ever since I've been on this commission, is involving folks. So if there was a conversation earlier, and then we have a new map, it just seems to me that those people who expressed interest should know, just like we know, that there's something different on the table. That's my only point.
Commissioner Denson and Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, I'm speaking, reluctantly in favor of the motion because this is the only option where our constituents have any say over the process. Because if we don't choose these maps, then the state legislature is going to choose the maps. And the state legislature is not going to have any public input on the maps they do. And the state legislature is not going to, that's it after this point. So, while we have had limited ability to have public input, and I do wish we could have more, the state legislature is not going to go through our local BOE. They're not going to have Zoom calls at all with constituents. And they're going to draw the maps if we don't pass this out with consensus, these maps. So to me, the conversation changes more to, is this a good map that we can accept? Or is it completely unacceptable, and therefore we'd rather have zero input over this map and have the state legislature choose it for us? That's the options as far as I understand it right now. And so I think to give our constituents any kind of belief that they've had any kind of say over this at all, this is the only option that we have. And I wish that wasn't so. I wish that we had more time. I wish the census numbers had come in earlier. I wish the reapportionment office had gotten back to us earlier so we could have seen these maps before. We're kind of between a rock and a hard place, but at least this rock, we know what it looks like. The hard place, we have absolutely no idea what that's going to be. Honestly, some of us could be drawn out of this district. We know that's a possibility. It's being done in Gwinnett County. It's being discussed. And there's also, at least we are trying to abide by the districts that exist before. One of the most important things to me has been trying to not disrupt our constituents' lives. They're already going to have, many of them, a new congressperson, new state representative, new state senator, not going to have any kind of continuity with their representative government. And so I'd like to disrupt as little as possible so we can have some consistency in their lives. And I really fear that the state does not have that as a priority.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Edwards.
Madam Clerk, were we to solicit public input before this?
It's on the agenda for public input
Okay.
tonight, yes.
Is there any public input?
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. I appreciate you raising that.
Sure.
Is there any public input this evening on this matter?
Anybody out there? All right, well, I have heard some constituent input on this item, and, I've heard from constituents who want the Republican-controlled state legislative delegation to draw the maps. So that's the input that I've heard. I've heard input that, Mr. Chair, that the desire for the Republican legislation or the Republican delegation to draw the commissioner from District 3 and District 5 in the same map. I've heard input to draw the commissioner from District 6 into the commissioner for District 10. I've heard input desiring to create possibly one 5 points district. But I certainly have heard from folks in District 7 that are perfectly fine with having us punt on this and have the Republican-controlled delegation draw the maps. So I think if that's what happens here, we should probably just expect, like has been alluded to before, some pretty tumultuous changes to the government, akin to what we saw in Gwinnett County during the special session, where a Republican-controlled delegation basically restructures a Democratic-leaning city government to greater align with the goals of the Republican Party. So I think that this vote has some certain ramifications, and I've heard murmurs already about, combining districts, combining individuals that are left-leaning into one district to basically try to, oust somebody from office. So I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility, and that's what I've heard. So with that, I'll support the recommendation, the motion on the table, just in terms of maintaining some consistency for our government, doing our best as the commission to put forward a recommendation that will not be something tumultuous. And I think staff has done a fine job working with the State Reapportionment Office to come up with a very consistent presentation here, so I'm proud to support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Thorne.
Oh, thank you. I didn't hear as much as Commissioner Edwards. I do now. If the folk that I represent, and I figure I represent several people, but if they've had that conversation, I have not had it. So I'm going to stick with my my motion, and if you are concerned about my vote and my one vote, then maybe you might want to table this and get some clarification, but I have not heard that, Commissioner Edwards.
All right. Any further input? Commissioner Wright.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to, I guess just to reiterate my last three votes on this that I'm not supportive of, whether it's the process or what happened to District 4. Just to clarify, some people seem to think I don't know about boundaries going down a street. And so I want to clarify that the map takes a very small neighborhood street in my district and makes more than half of the people's mailboxes on the opposite side of the street. So I know they go down streets, but I also know you have to have continuity and community. So District 4, I cannot vote for this positively to move forward as something and look at my constituents and say, I voted that it's okay for your mailbox to be in a different district. So I don't know how much more straightforward to make for my, what's happening in my district, as well as the voting precinct being moved out of my district. So I've tried to explain that so that I have a lot of experience with redistricting, whether it's school attendance zones. I was on the committee in 2010. We had a very robust engagement committee and public presentations for public input and stuff like that. So it's part of it's the process and part of it's the result, which is why I won't be supporting it.
Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I'll just point out that District 3 and 5 go, the border is on Vincent Drive, and there are folks in District 3 whose mailboxes are in District 5, and it's been like that for 10 years. I don't have as much of an issue about a mailbox. People don't live in their mailboxes. Some people have mailboxes that are half a mile away from their actual homes because they have long driveways. Some people don't have mailboxes. They have P.O. boxes. That's not an issue. I think, the direction we're heading, and yeah, we're constrained by time and, delayed data and, all of that. But, I am much, much more concerned about putting this in the hands of our Republican legislative delegation because they play dirty. And they really obviously have very little concerns about the needs and wants of this community. And they have little concerns about voting rights and, a truly democratic government in the state of Georgia. So I would like to say that we need to do what we need to do to maintain as much control of this at this stage as possible. I mean, we handed it over to the Board of Elections and let them do their thing, and our data office has been presented with kind of the quandary of getting this whittled down, and I appreciate the very objective approach that's been taken and not completely redrawing these districts and just working around the edges as much as possible. I mean, if we did have time, if the data had been presented to us months and months ago, I would have liked to have seen the Board of Elections take a new approach to this, but I think we're playing with fire here if we reject this, considering the objective process by which it's been created.
All right. Bit of public input before we have a bit of input, Commissioner Houle, before we move to a vote.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any room here to have a meaningful discussion, I'd like to have space for that before we vote, because right now it doesn't sound like we have unanimity. And, I mean, to reiterate, it's been stated very clearly to us that any one person voting no today is like the guaranteed way to ensure that the people of Athens have the least involvement they could possibly have in this. Insofar as we are connected to the people of Athens as their local representatives, our input will not be utilized, nor will the input of constituents directly in any kind of public fashion be utilized by any indication we've gotten from the state legislature at all. I mean, sometimes we say we don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but in this case, acknowledging all of the unideal circumstances that have contributed to this timeline and where we are today, this is letting the perfect be the enemy of anything at all. The unfortunate reality here is that we have to decide between doing anything at all today or nothing. And I appreciate the concerns that are being raised by my colleagues here who are feeling discontent with some of the circumstances of this. I have, the latest version of the map draws a line right down the middle of one of the roads in my district, while a number of neighborhoods get redrawn into Commissioner Denson's district. The old version of my district also included a neighborhood spliced in half that's now being entirely drawn into District 5, as well as Brooklyn Road having the line drawn right down the middle. I mean, the unfortunate reality is we have to deal with that just sometimes being the case on the margins of our districts. And we'd all like more public input all the time. I think this government does a particularly unique job of building in public input. But if we don't pass this unanimously today, we don't pass it at all. So I would invite my colleagues to, I guess, share a rationale for why, given that reality, given that unfortunate black and white between an unideal thing and a very bad thing, why not go with the better of the two options? And what is the plan that's being proposed as an alternate? Because so far, I haven't heard any kind of viable plan for us to do anything if we don't pass this unanimously today.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess this is a question to staff in the attorney's office and to Joseph. So I guess first I would encourage any of my colleagues, which I appreciate my colleagues who have shared their specific concerns on this. Anyone who's considering voting no on this, to please voice why you're going to vote no. And I say that because if it's something that we can deal with, like the Grand Ellen Drive, like I have no qualms. If we can figure out a way to put Grand Ellen Drive back in there and move something else, like I have no qualms with that. I want us to find a solution here so we move forward. Commissioner Thornton brings up that she wants to have more public input. If we can figure out a way that we get to vote on this on January 4th instead of right now so that we can get public input, I'm all for that. And so I really encourage anybody who's going to vote no, please voice why you're going to vote no so see if we can deal with it as a body and fix it so that everybody's happy so we can move forward, rather than just saying it's the state assemblies now to deal with this. So, and so I guess that's a two-part thing that just encouraging that. And then the second thing would be, what would be the options if all of my colleagues would like to move forward in that fashion? What are our options that we could revisit this in January?
Commissioner Denson, an option is to make a substitute motion to hold this item. Certainly, I've suggested that there are a couple of specific layers of analysis that we could undertake, including the extent to which these majority-minority districts do emphasize minority representation, So, if we can find a way, I would find that ideal. I don't want to do anything other than deliver to the General Assembly a unanimous vote on this, obviously. To the extent that informal interaction is a possibility, post any vote, I will be asking every member of the local delegation to support a map that did have local input, that does have this level of fine-tuning that Joseph described, and symmetry among district sizes. So
I guess my question is a little more specific. So I guess, for example, with Grand Ellen Drive, if this body wished to go ahead and draw that back in, how would we have to go about doing it? And like, I think that to answer Commissioner Thornton's concern with public input, I mean, that would just be more time. I would have hoped, if we gave a few more weeks, we would give opportunity for the public to view these maps. And I guess if to any of my colleagues is concerns, like, could we deal with the Grand Ellen Drive? If we did that, do we have to send it all the way back to reapportionment and start the process over?
Yep.
If any changes occur after this,
Any
it'll
changes
have to go
at
back
all?
for technical review.
Just
Yes.
like the letter from Director.
Okay.
Director Wrightson.
And so I guess I'm just wanting, I'm willing to go down that road if it's going to be worth it. And that's why I want my colleagues to speak to what their concerns are, because I don't want to go through that whole process and then end up in the exact same spot again and doing this all over again. But if all of us can say, this is where our problems are, so we know what our list is that we need to fix, then I'm willing to table this and we come back. But I'm not willing to table this if we just have no idea why people are going to vote no and send staff all the way through this whole process again. It's not fair to staff over the holidays, it's not fair to us.
That's right.
So if anybody's got concerns about they're going to vote no, please, please, please voice them so we can actually address them.
Well,
So-
I've already voiced mine.
You did. I appreciate it, yes.
So Joseph, insofar as any, changes in the boundaries go, the process would look like, identifying those changes, submitting a new back with those changes to the reapportionment office, getting feedback from them, which also could include some other modifications as they provided here, and then a return to this body for confirmation. Is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Parker and then Hamby.
Could we hold this for a week to get community input?
So,
meeting again until the January 4th.
I mean, we could add a meeting.
No,
This is pretty important. This is, about democracy. Are we willing to work hard for our constituents if we're really concerned about public input?
so if we're going to hold, I'd recommend holding it until our next scheduled meeting. That provides a little bit larger window of input opportunity and notice of whatever those input sessions would be.
Well, if anyone has a problem with the map, no one likes the process, but if you have a problem with the map, I appreciate Commissioner Wright expressing her problems with the map. But if you have a problem with the map, please say so.
One of the,
Well, I've got Commissioner Hamby's not spoken yet. Yeah.
I was just giving my highlight reel. I really, this is kind of a little too late to go through the nitty-gritty of the process about this that is uncomfortable for me, as well as the results of what we have in front of us. So I'm not going to just sit here and try to banter through the long list of things that have been the issues, which is why I've been voting no all three times. So I also don't want to waste anybody else's time on this process. We saw how long it took. The one map that was approved by the majority of the commission, November 17th, it didn't come back till the 7th of December. So I'm not sure that, that gives you the timeline for that feedback as well.
It's pretty clear folks are either interested in sort of having an extended process or not. I don't want to belabor the conversation, y'all. I mean, I appreciate everybody's input, but I mean, really, unless you've got something new to present, I think it's time to move to a vote.
Well, it remains unclear to me whether anybody who's currently opposing it is offering anything we can do, or if it's just a let's vote no and then consider ourselves having utterly failed, and then letting an entire other group.
Commissioner, I think everybody's had that opportunity. I mean, if anybody would have wanted to articulate some specific elements of a path forward, that opportunity's existed. So, Commissioner Link.
I mean, I'm wondering if, those who do have issues with the process itself, if a vote to abstain would send a different signal to the legislative delegation if we were to pass this 8-0.
And certainly an abstention is an option for commissioners, in terms of process.
If that will help you move this forward, I will do that.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and move to a vote. If we do roll call, Madam Clerk, beginning with Commissioner Thornton.
Thornton,
Abstain.
Hamby,
No.
Davenport,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Link,
Yes.
Wright,
No.
Benson,
Yes.
Hool,
Yes.
Edwards,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no, 1 abstention.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk, I appreciate it. All right, the next item is an item of new business, so I do need a motion for suspension of rules.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I wanted to recognize County Manager Williams.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify, since there was a lot of discussion about, what could be or what the next steps are. The motion that approved the agenda item did approve for the map as approved by the commission without a unanimous to be submitted forward for whatever that, so those are the next steps, and then beyond that, we're not sure.
Thank you, Manager Williams, and certainly, as I indicated a couple of minutes ago, I'll be appealing to every member of the delegation to use these maps as a basis for final approval on the state level, given the amount of work that's already gone into them and the number of other matters that are on their plate. I would love this to be removed from concern or consumption of their time and energy, simply given that we've already given a lot of great technical support to this. So, thank you.
I do have a technical question.
Yes, ma'am.
In the certification letter dated 12/10, Director Wright says, "I certify that the proposed map submitted to the Legislative and Congressional Reappointment Office from the Clarke County Board of Commissions has received technical review approval." But the map that was certified was not the one that was voted on. Is that a technical issue that needs to be addressed?
Well, the certified map was just voted on just now.
Pardon?
The certified map from the state was just voted on just now.
No, I'm talking about her letter of what she received. What she received was not what we voted on. What she received was what staff made.
She received the second.
The first
second
map
one.
was voted on by this commission and then
Yes.
submitted to the state, and then they suggested changes which were made, which you voted on the subsequent map just now.
Okay, you don't follow my question. But she thinks that the map she certified came from the Clarke County Board of Commissioners. It did not. It came from staff. The one that was made on the 8th.
The map that was submitted voted on the November 16th, submitted on the 17th. It was voted on the 16th, and that map, as voted on, was submitted to the state.
I know, but it was changed on the 8th and resubmitted for her certification on the 10th. Is that not, I'm following what was on the Board of Elections?
She made modifications to the map that we submitted to her, and so the map, as she returned it to us, passes muster with the reapportionment office.
You made a second expedited technical review between the 8th and
Right.
the 10th.
But I thought that was you moving around what we talked about already today.
Yes, ma'am. 12 the districts were
all-
changed
eight
to the tune of
districts.
12 census blocks. Yes,
I
ma'am.
just want to make sure everybody's clear on her letter and which map it was addressing. Now it's been approved by the commission, but the map that was made last week was not seen by us.
It's been adopted by the commission.
It has now,
Well,
but
Yes, ma'am.
but
But-
she thinks it was submitted by us, and that was the one that was changed on the 8th.
Well,
I'd hesitate for someone on this body to make assertions for what someone who's not in the room thinks.
Well,
I'm
And
just-
we've
just
already
trying to-
voted on this item.
Commissioner, I think, staff has, had these technical interactions with State Reapportionment Office. We recognize that they made some modifications to our initial proposal.
they requested the modification. Staff made those modifications, gave it back to them for their review, and then they certified that, and then that's what we brought forward. So it was it wasn't that it was just staff, it was in response to a directive from, is that fair?
Yes, sir. And I will add that again, not to put words in the director's mouth, but her proposed edits were quite granular, surprisingly granular.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thanks, staff. I appreciate it. All right. Our item of new business is to approve additional parcels for inclusion in the Georgia Environmental Protection Division's voluntary remediation program. We previously approved one of the formerly industrial parcels below the railroad tracks leading down toward the river for inclusion in this program, and we've been requested to include a couple of other additional parcels. As staff has indicated in the agenda report, this doesn't deviate from any opportunity to provide monitoring. It just situates that monitoring somewhat different vis-à-vis the state. So certainly entertain a motion on this item, if someone would so move.
I'll make a motion to approve these parcels for inclusion.
And I second.
All right, would you like to speak to the motion or no further comment, Commissioner Denson?
No further comment.
All right, Commissioner Miles?
good.
All right, any further input from commissioners? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hearing none, I'd consider a motion to adjourn special called session.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Davenport, second from Commissioner Denson. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. I know Commissioner Hamby has to go to a neighborhood function in his district. So Commissioner Hamby, thank you, and happy holidays. All right, we are going to now move into the agenda-setting portion of the evening. We have 7 items on the consent agenda and a couple opportunities for public input. I'm going to go ahead and call for any public input on consent agenda items, which are 1 through 7, before I call for commissioners to consider removal of any item that they'd like to discuss. So is there any member of the public that would like to speak to items 1 through 7, which are the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and come behind the rail. Is there any commissioner who would like to remove an item from consent for discussion? All right, we are going to move on then to public input on old and new business. So those are items 8 through 20. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to old and new business, items 8 through 20? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and begin with discussion. Item 8 is an old business item that Commissioner Houle asked for a hold on from the November cycle. Commissioner Houle, would you like to provide any further input now? I know you discussed some interest in exploring the specifics of the development plan associated with this pump station.
Yeah, just briefly, I had a good conversation with Manager Williams yesterday about this, following up a couple lingering concerns, which I think could be broadly summarized as as a government's long-term liability for this, not only this project specifically, but these sorts of things. Manager Williams, please correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but as I understand it, historically, we've only had one pump station of this size anywhere in the community. We have this gravity-fed sewer system that works really well. All the other ones that we've maybe heard about are very small for just 1 or 2 lots. So something that's large like this is particularly unique. We approved one earlier this year for Lantern Walk, where we're understanding when and under what circumstances we'll be charged with maintaining it in the future. And I think there's some questions just around how well-prepared staff is to continue to take on the maintenance of these sorts of things, and how we're setting up future generations to be responsible for our decisions today. And I guess where I feel is, now that this is sitting in my district, I'm hesitant to tip the next domino and kind of set a precedent that this is how we're going to go about new development without having a stronger understanding as a body about whether this is a smart way to set ourselves up long-term. So that's my big concern. Also, just looking for a little more clarity from staff on the way that what can be built here is affected by whether this pump station is or is not approved. And then finally, similar to the Lantern Walk pump station we discussed earlier this year, there was a question raised about whether solar could be installed. And so if we are to move forward with this pump station, just making sure that that is captured in the language somehow to ensure that that happens, so.
Thanks for summarizing that, Commissioner.
Thanks.
Manager Williams, do you have anything to provide at this point?
Yeah, and I do appreciate Commissioner Houle mentioning this before and yesterday. So just some feedback here. As Professor Frank Stevens was fond of saying, gravity doesn't fail. And so, gravity sewer system, things go where they're supposed to ultimately. Sometimes they get out. I think it's amazing and still an engineering feat that we don't have many pump stations, and that's not typical in most communities. Before the Lanterns Walk, the only one I was aware of is just outside of Winterville. So there is, with a pump station, that's basically a place where sewage goes and then it's pumped into the system, so usually over a rise that it otherwise couldn't get to with gravity. So it is possible, much like Lanterns Walk, that we could take ownership of that. There are existing developments that have pump stations that are privately owned. And I think one of the concerns, Commissioner Houle, you had is like, well, what happens if, an HOA or somebody doesn't perform? Whose problem does it become? And so that's just, hasn't been typical, but there are circumstances where that's happened. So I'd say staff is, from a maintenance perspective, we would always go the path of least resistance where we weren't maintaining things that are capable of failure, and we work hard not to do that. But if you wanted to, you could add it for that purpose. The development itself hasn't gone through plans review yet. Staff's taken a look at it. There are a couple of issues that would have to be addressed if it were to go there. And I will say from a solar perspective, the developer got that message, and they are willing to make it solar or install solar as part of that. But I will follow up with some more specific detail on that, Commissioner Houle.
Thank you, Manager Williams. Commissioner Edwards.
Seems to me if a HOA refused to fix a pump station servicing their property, we would just condemn their property. I mean, they would have a non-functioning toilet in a residence. We would shut them down, right?
Well, more likely than not. So HOA is a structure where residents pay in for a common purpose, and you see this for landscaping or what have you, a pool perhaps. And there are times, and HOAs are staffed by volunteers. It's people, the homeowners, they're on their, and sometimes you get really motivated people and sometimes you don't. And I guess if the maintenance were ever overlooked by the HOA and it started to fail and they didn't have a mechanism by which to do that. But when a developer does turn over these things, we do require that they set up something like that so that there is some accountability for it. And I think that's really the question of all this is, if a homeowner 10 years from now buys into it and there's a defunct HOA and they don't even know about it, now they've got a vested interest in the property but don't understand.
But it runs with the land, right? The
Yes.
deed. So they have constructive notice. So we can sue them.
Judd, I'm not as familiar with HOA law.
Wouldn't the HOA keeping up a pump for sewage run with the land?
Well, I think ultimately, they'd be in violation of some of our codes related to,
No, but I'm saying they'd have notice of a structure that exists that they
Oh,
have to
yes,
pay
they
into
would.
to maintain.
They
That would be in the deed
that,
to the property.
I think they would. You generally get a copy of your home.
Yeah.
When you buy a piece of property, you get a copy of your covenants, which include what
Yeah.
covers the
Yeah.
HOA.
And if they don't maintain it and it spills sewage everywhere, we're out there.
Well, that is true, and we could bring, action against them, probably the health department. could,
Negligence.
I think. Well, I think it'd be more like, for having not maintained a proper sewer system. Ultimately, though, if they don't have the wherewithal to do it financially, we're still in a bad situation because we have a neighborhood of people that are paying taxes and they don't have their toilets aren't running, and that would be there'd be a lot of pressure on y'all to get to,
But we could pay for it and put a lien on their property.
Putting money up front for maintenance, but that ran out after 20 years, I believe, right? Which, goes more quickly than we realize. And then we're taking care of that structure. So, if we make that decision and that's what we want to do, that's fine. But if there is another way, perhaps that should be an option that could be developed for us to see for future, so we don't go through this whole thing, as Commissioner Hull is saying, every time we run into this.
Yep, Manager Williams, I think of some other recent updates in our public utilities programming, some of them embedded in our service delivery plan, but some of it, somewhat standalone. For example, our affordable housing interaction with public utilities. And I think it would be healthy to consider, how do these rest within our broader array of sewer facilities? That might be helpful. I like where you're going, Commissioner Myers. Commissioner Hool.
Thanks, and I like where this conversation is going. I guess my understanding to date is that this came as a recommendation essentially because we don't have any kind of policy on the books that would preempt a recommendation explicitly, but not necessarily without concerns existing, not only of myself, but even among staff about this sort of thing. And so, what I currently have is a concern about an absence of policy around this sort of thing, or an absence of a plan for dealing with this in the future being figured out on the front end, so that we're not making a series of decisions like this ad hoc, seeing capacity in our sewer system today, seeing just kind of approval from staff because there's nothing explicitly making them consider the long-term effects right now. But 20 years from now, there's 40 of these things all over the community, and if what we've seen in other communities around other infrastructure is any indication, many of them probably failing. We've created this literal and figurative mess when it's probably not any of us, but someone else, having to make the decision about how to deal with it. And I'd just like to remind everybody that when it comes to stormwater, we've already got staff going out sometimes to clean up those messes on private property, and the practical effectiveness of trying to see through getting finances back in court is, not necessarily very fruitful, and certainly is a much messier process than not ending up there in the first place. I recall a TSPLOST project that my predecessor advocated for the public to purchase roads that weren't being maintained, and of course there are other private roads that are not being maintained. So there's kind of a history already that we're dealing with of private HOA-owned infrastructure. There's a pool in my district, or there's another issue, not being maintained properly. And the messiness of who's responsible does not play out in any clear or efficient way for the residents who don't have a functional HOA. And so I just want to make sure that, we're being good stewards of present and future experiences of the people of this community. So I don't think we need to belabor it further today. But.
Thanks, Commissioner. Manager Williams, any other thoughts?
I will say staff is working on design specifications that we could put into place for these pump stations, since they are starting to become an issue, a new thing.
All right, and we will see this first Tuesday of January. All right, item 9 is another item of old business. It's community benefits agreement submitted by agencies wishing to qualify for rent reduction for use of ACC government facilities. For members of the public, we have been providing emergency condition opportunity for those nonprofits who rent our facilities for $1 a year. but we had a standing plan to move to a kind of more formulaic opportunity moving forward. And so decision was to hold this item. And I know commissioners have had some conversations about how to move forward as a body. So Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to confer with any commissioners who are interested in this item and creating a CDO, talking to staff, particularly with property that was donated to Athens-Clarke County and a facility that was built specifically for this non-government organization that has very little use other than the use for which it was built. So I'll be reaching out to see if anybody would like to put our heads together on this and come up with a viable and fair proposal regarding that particular property.
All right, thanks. We've got a few folks. We've got Commissioner Denson, Commissioner Parker, and Commissioner Myers.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate all the work that's being done on this. And Commissioner Thornton and I have been working on what will hopefully become a CDO that kind of takes into consideration the effects on the pandemic and how that's affected all the organizations operating in these businesses, or not businesses, but in these properties. And but also taking into account what's been, historic inequities amongst many of the tenants in these properties for many years. So we'll have something coming forward to y'all pretty soon for you to peruse.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Parker.
I am going to express my support for holding both the lease levels for EADC, HDC, and the other minority-led, minority-serving nonprofits at $1, at least for this coming year. I know that we can't commit future commissions to do anything. Hopefully, a lot of us will still be here to keep that the case for years to come. But that would help them gain footing that they lost due to our ad hoc policy that robbed them of funds that could have been put into the community. And I do think it is important that we, at some point, make use of the policy that GOC has worked very hard to put together. But I do think that is very important for us to do in the interim and then let that go into effect sometime in the future. I think the same is true for Town and Gown. They have expressed that they are uncertain of how to move forward with their financing model in order to stay afloat as an organization. And so giving them a head start and working out what that can look like for them of at least a year is something that I'd also like to see happen. So I guess I would have liked to do that last meeting, but I guess convey to my colleagues, including those that are working on some sort of commission to find option, that I still think that is probably the best way forward.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of different ideas floating out there, and I'll see which one comes forward. Just about the policy itself, when I was thinking about this last week when we tabled it, it seemed to me that the question about the maintenance costs actually for Town and Gown, and I don't have the numbers ready here, but sort of equaled about 420, equaled the amount with their reduced to cover, with their reduced rent to cover the roof and other maintenance, and I thought that was pertinent. But I also had a question about how the policy applies. One of the speakers, the public who spoke, talked about the question of ever increasing rent due to increased fundraising to pay for the rent. So they're paying another $5,000 for rent, but now they're going to have, that adds to their income, so now they're going to next year have to do that. Was that considered, or is that a little loophole in this policy? That I'm just interested if that was discussed in the GOC. I know it was a long time ago now.
Was there any GOC member who recalls discussion of that revenue component?
I'm not
We can look back at some
Okay.
notes from those meetings and certainly talk to staff.
But if there, I mean, and if that's, what everyone agrees is fine, but I just am concerned if that was, I'm just curious whether that was considered, the fact that you'd always be increasing it, because now we've raised that money, we had a different special fundraising for that. Anyway, that's all.
All right. Commissioner Thornton.
It's been good working with Commissioner Denson on this, talking to some of the agencies. And I think the things that Commissioner Parker and Commissioner Myers have brought up are things that we've talked about. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen, but personally, I don't think anybody that uses our facilities for the public good should pay rent, period. If they offer a service and it's opened up to the community, I think that helps us in the long run. But I don't think that is probably going to pass, but I do want to go on record that I don't think anybody who is doing the public good should have to pay a rent. I know Commissioner Link spoke up about working on the CDO. If you want to get, whoever wants to get on board, so we're all on the same page, we welcome it. We just started talking, Saturday? So it's not like the train has been out the runway that long. We just had a general conversation, so feel free if anybody has some information or input or questions or want to be, a part of that. We didn't mean it. We're not trying to exclude anybody.
Thanks, Commissioner. I appreciate that and appreciate everybody giving some consideration. I mean, I'll certainly say for myself, I've contemplated the reality that through this era, any organization has had challenges with fundraising and operations. And so at a bare minimum, a prospect is that we say that if in any fiscal year, we remain in this emergency conditions, then we'll project the dollar into the next fiscal year and begin the formal model following that. So that's what I'd at least like to be considered as part of the conversation. All right, 10 and 11 are both zoning items that were placed the formal hold on. Yes, Commissioner Parker.
Mr. Mayor, I actually noticed something on the consent agenda that I'd like to discuss briefly, if I may.
Sure.
If we could go back. Items 1 and 2, which I could address at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
great, thank
Yeah, and they utilize the same
Right.
lot offset policy from public utilities where sometimes a line goes through 2 properties to reach a third.
Okay, so it's effectively connecting, which way that they will go about connecting the water at these locations to existing sanitary sewer at adjacent parcels? Is that correct?
That's right, and I will admit to not having looked at the maps of these.
Oh, it's
but,
fine, yeah, I did for a
staff may
second,
be
I
able
thought
to
it was really
provide some
interesting.
further update.
Yes, there's on Arch Street, there's a 20-foot access and utility easement through one track for the track behind it to actually make it to the sewer up front. So
Okay.
those are the types of things. It's called a lot one removed.
Yeah.
One lot removed, so if you're away, then you're traversing another one to get to the public
Okay.
utility.
So in facts and issues number 4, well, I'll go ahead and say that while we were talking a little bit, I looked up, on Q Public, to some information about these lots, particularly with the Arch Street, 326 Arch Street. The people that own this lot actually have J.W. York Properties. I don't know if y'all are familiar with them. Have actually owned pretty much every house on that street between Gresham and Dublin. And if you're familiar with them, they do a lot of gentrification. They build a lot of really out-of-scale houses in neighborhoods like mine. So my question is, Manager Williams, if we don't approve this, would that, so it says in facts and issues number 4, as I started to say a second ago, they would have to hire a professional engineer, a construction contractor, payment for plans review, and provision of a performance bond. That's so, right? They would have to do all of that rather than pay us $7,000 for what otherwise would be really expensive work.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to bring that to y'all's attention. I'll probably be reaching out to them just to see what are they planning for this very low-income area. But I just wanted to let the public know that in this meeting as well as you all. Thank you. You can actually leave these off the consent agenda if you could.
So we're going to, Clerk Spratland, leave 1 and 2 off consent. All right. Commissioner Link?
I'll add to to Commissioner Parker's commentary on that, because I had a similar situation in my district where the developer came to us after the fact, after they'd already built on this internal lot, asking for the water hookup. And it was a property that it was tripled, it was 2 lots actually, tripled in density and purely for student housing. You know, it had no on-site parking. It's in a adjacent property, has an agreement for the parking, and it's owned by the same investor, student housing developer. So, I mean, and I had a long conversation with folks at Public Utilities about the kind of conundrum that we're put in these situations. And I mean, this is a policy recommendation, I guess, that maybe committee can discuss, and like, maybe we need to have plans in hand before we approve these hookups. Because these kind of denser student housing projects that are injected into what are, you know, traditionally very modest, low-income, single-family communities, you know, where you have properties that don't have street frontage, don't have on-site parking, it causes all kinds of havoc for the surrounding property owners, and literally, like, either can trap someone inside their house or drive people out of their homes. So I think we need to create some new policy around this process here.
We'll be putting that on the committee item hopper. All right. All right, moving on. Again, 10 and 11 are zoning items for which the cycle hold was placed. 12 is technical support for construction of Classic Center around material testing and inspections. Is there any input on this item? Can this go to consent?
Move to consent.
I'll stop raising this up if anyone could share with me their thoughts on why it's good for us to put things on consent before we've selected a vendor, because it feels uncomfortable to me to have agenda items where there's still not a report on which vendor has been selected being moved to consent before that's determined. So at this point, I'd like to keep it off unless someone can share with me why that's.
Actually, thanks for that note, Commissioner Houle. Typically, we wouldn't put it on consent until a vendor was selected. Oh, there we go. It is TBD. All right, yeah. We'll leave this on discussion.
So I'll go ahead and say in advance, I'd like to do the same with item 14 as well.
And I'm
for the
okay
same
with that.
reason.
I'm totally okay with that.
All right, so we'll leave 12 on discussion, given that we don't have a vendor. 13 is updated budget, not to exceed guaranteed maximum price amendment, and project management services, also for the Classic Center. Any discussion of this item?
Move to consent.
No, I thought you wanted that poll. You didn't want that poll?
Item 13 doesn't have this issue. It's just 12 and 14 that have this issue.
Yeah, 13, we're not looking for a new vendor. Everybody okay with 13 on consent? All right, 13, Gene, we'll move to consent. 14 is broadband connectivity, which is a SPLOST 2020 project, and again, we don't have a final vendor on this. Any input on this item? All right, so we'll leave that one on discussion. Let's see, 15, we do have a vendor on the Memorial Park sewer replacement and dog park improvements. Mr. Wright?
Let me see if I can get a quick summary in here. Maybe we can get it on consent. This is a great project. I think a team effort with Public Utilities and Leisure Services here. We approved the preliminary plans and the final construction plans February 2021. So this step is addressing some details to what the improved dog park will be on top of where the much-needed sewer improvements. The sewer, this whole sewer shed or watershed is 110 acres. It's going to be improving things relative to 278 parcels on the east side of Memorial Park. There's one resident, the foundation of their garage is being washed away from some of the issues that have been happening here, and I think that's all going to be taken care of with this project. So, and then the icing on the cake is an improved dog park with ADA access and a second access so that people can get to it from Woodland Hills. So it's a great great project, and I'm happy to put it on consent if you guys are.
Be a much improved version of a frequently visited spot.
Love to Death, I think is what it's called, one of those.
That's right. Staff, I've heard that from many times. Any further input on this item? Move to consent? All right. Gene, we're going to go ahead and move 15 to consent. All right, 16 is the request of the judiciary for funds from a specific pot of funds for judicial activities that the state has created. So Commissioner Denson?
Thank you, Mayor. And I just had a question on this one that I don't expect staff to know, but maybe look into. Because I see that this includes funding and creation of new full-time positions in the district attorney's office. And I'm guessing this is all, and for staff attorneys so that they can get back up to capacity. But I do wonder, just always concerned about making sure there's balance here. I'm wondering if it's possible to have also funding go towards the public defender's office so they can actually have their capacity increased, since they will also have to be increasing capacity along with this program if it goes through. So I guess just wondering if that's possible and if that has been looked into, and it's,
Manager Williams, do you know if they would be applying directly themselves or if there's another funding source for them?
Well, my understanding that of the 110 million that, 96 was on the court side, and then 14 was going to be on the public defender side. So great question, Commissioner Denson. We could ask if Public Defender Donnelly intends to apply for a corresponding amount of funds from his pot. So we'll clarify that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely want to see. I want to see this being uneven here. So.
No, it's, you like to see the same number of players on each side of the field, don't you? Yes. Commissioner Thornton?
No, I think County Manager Williams I'm good. Thank you.
Sure. Commissioner Myers?
Yeah, this grant adds a bunch of new positions, and the money here is for a couple of years, I believe. So are these are salaries that, who takes on these salaries afterwards?
My early discussions with the court administrator were that these were just for the duration of the grant. But I will clarify that.
Okay.
And we should add that to the agenda item for the future.
Commissioner Houle?
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate my colleagues bringing up concerns I also share. And I would just say that I'm hesitant to approve this item without clarity on the stuff we're talking about. It feels very important to me. And I did also see that in the history number 6, there's a meeting being scheduled for December 21st. I don't know if staff already knows whether the Public Defender's Office is intended to be invited to that meeting, but if not, I would like to ask that
They are.
happen.
That team of folks they meet periodically, and it involves all the court officers and judges and public defender, police chief, sheriff, all those folks in that criminal justice arena that meet and talk and coordinate. So yes, I fully expect he is invited.
All right.
Mayor, if I could
Yes.
Yeah, because I am a little puzzled by this, and it might just be that I'm not aware how this all works. But I guess what I was thrown by is the fact, I see that, and I appreciate Manager Williams pointing out the 14 million, and Commissioner Wright pointed out where that's in the agenda item, how it's separate. But I guess I'm curious if it's, just a little bit of background information, if this is the norm for the state of Georgia, that, the court administrators, which I guess I would imagine are a neutral entity, when they were doing something like this, the funding would go towards prosecutors and defendants and public defenders' resources. So it just seems odd to me, I guess, that court administrators would only be able to pull in money for prosecutors. But
Well, I'll just make a distinction here too. So really, it's the chief superior court judge that is acting on behalf of the circuit, which is 2 counties. The court administrator is hired by them. So that was more of a staff to staff, So she'd be a peer for me, and y'all would be a peer with Superior Court Judge. So for whatever reason, and I can get some more information, the state decided to break it into two for, the circuit, and then a specific a bucket of money for the public defenders.
So if I'm getting this correct, like then the way it's broken down is the Superior Court judge can only apply for the prosecutor part, and that it's broken away where public defender's office has to do it separately if they want to have funding.
So there's a range of eligible uses for the funds, one of which is to hire some some positions there. But they're also, in the agenda item, providing some additional support for juvenile and probate court. You can use funds to rent space, in the Classic Center, which that might be at the culmination of meeting on December 21st. They may decide there's more. There's apparently waves of these application windows. There was one behind us that we did not apply for. This is the next one, which is open just for the month of January. So there could be subsequent and different requests for additional grant applications on behalf of the Superior Court Chief Judge.
Okay, and so the state has just decided that like you said, there's uses that are possible for them to apply for. One of those uses is not to actually give resources to public defenders.
No, I think they just had a separate carve
Right.
out so that, that could be a place where it was very well known and people could go, public defenders to go there.
I guess Mike, I'm sorry if I'm a little confused on this. So but the Superior Court judge, I guess this is one where the Superior Court can't go ahead and apply for the public defenders grant funding in the same way that's being done here.
Well,
I guess I don't understand why we have to rely upon, like, we're not relying upon the DA's office to apply for this grant or the juvenile court to apply for this grant. Yet we're going to say if the public defender's office wants that money, they're going to have to do it. You see what I'm getting at?
I do.
Okay.
I think the public defenders have a different entity they report to at the state.
Right, yeah.
And so it could be that it's through their respective reporting entities, if you will, the state. But I'll clarify that.
Okay.
Since I'm not giving you a very good answer right now.
I'm not giving you a very clear question either. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And just a quick note, sort of looking at some of what's happening nationally with the state-received ARPA funds, different states are administering these funds somewhat differently. So, I think what you've noted, Commissioner, is that there seems to be a somewhat unique approach to disbursement of funds. And I think that's true across funding categories. We saw, of course, in Georgia that there were a couple of categories that we applied for funds around, such as broadband. The Classic Centers applied for funds in the hard-hit industries category. And so every state had somewhat different categorical areas. So, I think the quirks transcend even the judiciary, but definitely include the judiciary. Manager Williams.
And sorry, I should have mentioned this before. So, within the range of eligible uses, I think the judiciary has signaled their priorities. And one of the priorities is to, address the backlog of cases, particularly, serious felony cases, because folks they need a disposition either way, and so there's, I believe, about 1,200 cases backlogged right now that we're aware of. That I think that's what the DA and the chief judge intend to do is, dive into those and try and dispose of those as quickly as possible. And I did want to confirm that these new positions that are being created are just through the end of the grant period. And so we'll make that clear in the agenda item as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Manager Williams. All right, we'll get a little more information there. Item 17 is a nominal request for pay increases for members of the Board of Elections. Input on this item. Commissioner Houle.
I had a good exchange. I was trying to put together an email to forward to y'all because I got to talk through a couple of these items with staff earlier today. But my take on this currently is to support the request for conference fees because there is a conference in March that our Board of Elections members would like to attend, and actually state mandates, at least one of them does. So it seems appropriate to cover that, but then I guess I'm curious colleagues' thoughts, but it seems to make sense to me to otherwise, even though this is a modest amount, wrap this into our overall budget discussion, just because we have a lot of boards, authorities, and commissions that are uncompensated, and maybe trying to tackle that more holistically would be better than just doing just this one. My 2 cents.
Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. I do see this board being a little bit different than other BACs. As I think other counties do also, as we have the attachments here that showing us what other counties across the state of Georgia, how they compensate Board of Elections members. And so I have no problem with these amounts, except for my question was on the election day pay. This would be the staff. It says that this, if we pass this, would be $100 for election day pay, which is very much in line with other counties. The odd thing to me, though, is then looking at the document, it says that already for Clarke County, on election day pay, they get paid $25 for the first hour and $15 for each hour afterwards. And to me, that would very quickly exceed $100 if you were worked 5 hours, you're over $100 at that point on a election day that I know can go for board of these members like 14, 16 hours, so.
That's right. And that is the overall compensation goes up. It's different there. Now, that was an initial staff recommendation based on some of this comparative analysis that was done.
Okay.
But the elections board met today to discuss it further, and perhaps Assistant Manager Edwards, Jones has some additional.
The Board of Elections heard this case today, and I think they're going to have further discussions about it. And I had this discussion with Director Soseby today. I think it was just an error in calculation.
Oh, okay.
So we'll come back with strike-through probably more than likely between now and January 4th.
Okay, so the attachments are just likely incorrect with the amount that they were listed there.
Well, just the election day
The
pay.
election day
In
pay.
addition to that, the training and conference pay as well.
Okay, so after those corrections are made, this will be an increase in all three of those
Correct.
fields. Okay, all right, thank you. That was my concern. So, yeah, I fully support this, and I do think that this would be compensation would be higher than most BACs that will be meeting because of the level of work they have to do and the level of training and expertise that's necessary. So yeah, I guess we could wait for the strike-throughs to happen, but otherwise, I'm fine for this being put on consent.
Anyone else before I return to Commissioner Houle? Commissioner Wright.
Yeah, I'm ready for this to move forward and support it being on consent, even if it does get some updates in between now and then. I think that they could let us know if it deviates more than what you just explained. But on your list of committee assignment prioritizing, Mr. Mayor, is on there that we would continue to discuss compensation for people who are on the boards, authorities, and commissions, similar to, we got started with, is that already on the list?
It is now.
Okay, thank you. And so then, and I'll just say that legislative review is sort of warmed up with this, or I guess GOC is too, because they studied that kind of thing for the Public Safety Commission. But I look forward to us prioritizing committee assignments and that being on there.
Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, my tendency is to want to leave this off consent just so that we can make the point that you're all making there now, because I think there could be some confusion. And so it could give us an opportunity to make sure that we explain this is a different kind of commission. They're already getting a pay. We're just making them up to date with others, but we're going to be looking into pay for other boards and authorities. And also the question about whether or not to wait till the new year. I think the point in here that the Board of Elections has more money left over in their budget. They're going to use this year's budget, and it does not require an increase budget amount to be approved for them. And that was a swaying point for me.
Thanks, Commissioner. All right, Commissioner, I'm sorry. Houle and then Denson, I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. I don't want to stand in the way of this moving forward. I mean, this is a thing that I feel inclined to support for sure. I want to caution against the idea that, like, there is some money left over in the Board of Elections budget, but we don't really have a whole lot of money just kicking around in our budget generally. And if we start looking at how this item could be copy pasted onto other boards, authorities, and commissions, it starts to become quite a bit more substantial year to year. And sort of once we commit, I don't think we stop committing that to our operational budget. So I guess what I'm hoping for is more information around that overall budget impact rather than just this single item kind of in a vacuum. I don't think we should understate how much work and sometimes expertise is required on a lot of other boards and authorities and commissions that we ask people to be on. Development authorities require training, maybe not quite as much. The Planning Commission is a huge undertaking. There's just a whole lot of resident bodies to think of here, and I'm cautious about jumping forward on this one. I understand we set the precedent a bit by saying we wanted to establish the Police or Public Safety Oversight Board and the Human Relations Commission with pay. I think as an indicator that we wanted to move in this direction. I think that was also to try to get those off the ground. But as we're revising this, I think it begs the question of how to thoughtfully revise the 30 or so other boards, authorities, and commissions, and that suddenly becomes a whole lot more than just $6,000 for half a year. So,
Commissioner Benson.
Yeah, just two quick things. I guess for one thing, one reason I guess I think that we should go ahead and do this now, and I'm assuming the request is coming before us now, is because before the FY23 budget would go into effect, there will likely be two elections, the May primary and extremely likely July runoff. I guess, yeah. The only other thing I would say, the only concern I have is just like looking at some of the other communities. I do feel like this pay is a little bit on the low side still for the size of population, number of registered voters we have in Athens-Clarke County. Just looking at Berrien County with 11,000 voters, $200, $350 for chair. There's a number of those, but so I'm fine with this, I guess. But I mean, I would consider increases, but yeah.
All right, Manager Williams, some input.
You might note that a rare administrative recommendation here, and I think there's been good points made. In the big scheme of things, nominal amount of money, and certainly the Board of Elections works very hard, just like all of our boards, authorities, and commissions. And this there'll be another, I know the Pension Committee just made a recommendation that they want a mid-year adjustment for retiree COLAs, which is going to have a much more significant financial impact. And I would just say that, we do have our budgeting process, and I think it's important that we do think strategically about what we want to do next year. And so rather than have mid-year adjustments or mid-year corrections or recommendations from advisory boards who are very ensconced in the work that they do, but don't necessarily have the bigger budget picture. I think we go through that. You look at all the priorities, and there'll be a lot this year, and you decide what it is, where you want to put your funds. So if you do this, I mean, it doesn't cause a budget crisis by any means, but I just think symbolically I'd like us to follow our budgeting timing and process each year.
Thanks, Manager Williams. All right, more discussion ahead, and certainly we're not compelled to make an action immediately. Just know that. All right, moving forward, Commissioner Wright, after a couple waves of work that resulted in, what seemed like an effective pilot program for alcohol serving at public events, the Legislative Review Committee has a recommendation to extend that for another calendar year.
Yeah,
So
I
if you speak
appreciate
to that.
staff bringing to our attention that the deadline we voted on, this is all about the festival zones. We all saw that it was executed for Twilight, Wild Rumpus. Unfortunately, we couldn't have AdFest. So it's set to expire January 31st, 2022, and staff has recommended that we go ahead and extend it to January 31, 2023, giving more time to experience it, refine it, and we believe Assistant Manager Jones feels that there'll be updates coming back in the next year so that we can fine tune it as it's happening. So
All right.
I would like to put that on consent.
Great. Any further input on that item? All right, everybody okay with consent there? All right. Gene, we got 18 on consent. All right. And 20 is a title only, because we're waiting for some information. So last item for discussion tonight is 19. This is the project concept and MOU for expansion of the Athens Neighborhood Health Center. You know, they've long desired additional rooms for support of residents and have a plan for that to move forward. And we've got a model for that with our existing staff. So any input on this side?
Yes.
Consent okay?
Yes.
All right, Jean, 19 is moving to.
I was like, yes, I'm leaning forward.
Oh, no, you just said yes.
Yes.
All right, everyone, it is 7:42 on December 14th, 2021. Appreciate everybody's work
Wow,
this
the old
afternoon
title
and
only.
evening, and hope everybody has a wonderful night. And given this is our last gathering together this year, a great holiday season. Can't wait to see you in some informal opportunities and again gathered here on January 4th. So thanks, everyone.